Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Erin Purdy. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Briscoe Center, and I'm very pleased to have you all with us tonight for what should be a fascinating conversation between Griffin Dunne and Don Carleton. Griffin is a member of the Briscoe Center's Ambassadors Council, a group of dedicated friends who help us collect and preserve the evidence of history. I believe a few other of our council members are with us tonight. If y'all could please raise your hands to be recognized. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do for us. So we're here tonight to celebrate Griffin's memoir, Mark Updegrove. Okay. All right. There we go. All right. We're good now. All right. Thank you, Mark. We're here tonight to celebrate Griffin's memoir, the Friday Afternoon Club. And our connection with Griffin actually goes back to his father, the author and journalist Dominick Dunne. The Briscoe Center is the proud home of his papers. To give you a sense of who he was, we have a short clip to share from After the Party, a documentary about his life.
His story is remarkable. It's stranger than fiction. The name Dominick Dunne. He's become the master of the written word.
Hey, Dominick Dunne, you gonna give up on Spectre and take over Barry?
No, I'm not. I only cover the trials of the rich, powerful, and famous, because they've got the bucks to spend on the million-dollar lawyers, the expert witnesses.
You know, Dominick Dunne is what Dominick Dunne is. He's not a journalist. He's a gossip columnist.
During my years as a stage manager, there were a lot of new young actors, and Grace Kelly and Steve McQueen. We all became pals. I thought I died and I'd gone to heaven. And they just sort of took me in, accepted me like I was one of them. I married the most wonderful lady. I mean, she was a beauty. She was an heiress. She was totally comfortable with who she was. And I was never comfortable with who I was.
The Lenny and Nick's parties was a veritable who's who of Hollywood. If they were famous and they were hot, they were at the Dunnes.
I knew, this is amazing that I'm doing this. I also knew it wasn't going to last. We had 5 kids. 2 died as infants. That's why Dominique became like our treasure.
He has gone through things that none of us want to go through.
Actress Dominick Dunne, star of the current film Poltergeist, died today in a Los Angeles hospital. She had been in a coma since she allegedly was strangled by her former boyfriend Saturday. Dominick Dunne was 22.
It led me into a new area of life, of becoming interested in justice.
Dominick had a voice that was so personal, that spoke to you right off the page. And I realized then that Vanity Fair had found its first voice, and we signed him up immediately.
I started out at Vanity Fair magazine with the man who killed my daughter. And I'm thinking I'm going to end it now with the Phil Spector trial.
Reaction to the verdict?
I call him an above-the-line star because the name Dominick Dunne, whether it be a novel or a biography or crime reporting, his name is a must-see, it's a must-read, it's a must-hear.
I hope that encourages you to track down that documentary. It's really wonderful. The Dunne papers include manuscript and article drafts, published works, audio and video recordings, correspondence, legal documents, and photographs, such as this one. Dunne was born in 1925, and after his military service in World War II, he married a beautiful Arizona ranching heiress named Ellen Griffin, with whom he had 3 children, Griffin, Alex, and Dominique. The Dunnes moved to Los Angeles, where Dominick worked as a television and movie producer. His acerbic wit and penchant for gossip led to him being professionally blackballed in Hollywood. He eventually sold everything he owned, except, thankfully, for his papers, and moved to New York and launched a career as a novelist. It was the horrific death of his daughter, Dominique, that brought Dunne back to LA in 1982. The promising young actress died after a brutal attack by her ex-boyfriend, John Sweeney, a tragic crime that Don and Griffin will discuss later. For Dominick, one way to process the pain was to write about it. With the encouragement of Tina Brown, the editor of the newly resurrected Vanity Fair magazine, he wrote what would become his first feature article, Justice, a Father's Account of the Trial of His Daughter's Killer. And in the papers, we have this draft. It's a page from that article with his own edits. The pairing of Dunne and Tina Brown proved to be a winning combination. His writing revealed the inner workings of New York society, Hollywood gossip, and high-profile criminal trials, such as the Menendez brothers. This is a transcript that he made notes on. And O.J. Simpson. These are his notebooks from his front row seat at the trial. Also, his correspondence with everyone from A-list celebrities to fans of his crime coverage is one of the more notable and entertaining parts of the papers. Here you see notes from Tina Brown and Katharine Hepburn. Dunne died in 2009. Beyond his writing, his enduring legacy is found in his unwavering support of the victims of violent crime and their families. As Mike Hogan wrote in this Vanity Fair obituary, justice wasn't just a plot device for him, it was his passion, and that driving passion is reflected in his papers. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Griffin Dunne has been an actor, producer, and director since the late 1970s. His film appearances include An American Werewolf in London, After Hours, Quiz Show, and Dallas Buyers Club. You've also seen him in such television shows as Frasier, House of Lies, This Is Us, and Only Murders in the Building. Dunne's directorial debut was the 1995 short film Duke of Groove, which was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Live-Action Short Film. He has directed 5 feature films, including Addicted to Love and Practical Magic. He released his critically acclaimed memoir last year. It became an instant New York Times bestseller. Dr. Don Carleton is the founding executive director of the Briscoe Center. A specialist in American political and news history, Don has authored 15 books, and he has served as the executive producer of 2 PBS documentaries, When I Rise and Cactus Jack, Lone Star on Capitol Hill. Please join me in welcoming them to stage.
I'm going to... Griffin, I'm going to be working on my next book while we're...
Go right ahead.
Is that okay?
No, the intro, there's nothing left to discuss.
Well, I'm going to ask you one question, and you can just... Okay.
I'll take it from there.
Yeah, all right. Well, listen, thanks, my friend, to, you're making the trek here. He's been on the road promoting this book and doing interviews, nonstop. He's been in Europe. He's been all over the United States. He's just a traveling man.
Well, I never missed a chance to come to Austin. Love this town.
There you go. I didn't even ask. So we're really pleased and honored to have you here, Griffin. And also, as Aaron mentioned, thank you very much for serving on our Ambassadors Council. That's just great. As Aaron mentioned so well, and as you saw the thing about the trailer about Dominick Dunne, that's how I know Griffin, is through Dominick Dunne. He was known as Nick to his friends, and that's how I'll refer to him here in our comments. Actually, how I got connected to Nick Dunne was through the late New York social and gossip columnist Liz Smith, native Texan, also a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin, whose papers we have here at the Briscoe Center. And I got to be good friends with Liz, who was quite a character. You knew.
Loved her.
Anyway, she's the person who introduced me to his father, because she said, I'd love to have Nick Dunne's archive sitting next to mine on the shelf. Mm-hmm. Sadly, that didn't. We have both, but they're not next to each other. Okay. I think yours is next to Walter Cronkite's.
I think he'd love that,
fathers,
too.
I mean. So we did get introduced, and after a few phone conversations, It started out a little slow. Your father was a little suspicious, I think, the first couple of times we talked. But Liz did a really good job on him. So after a few phone conversations, he and I had a very, very, very long lunch at a favorite place of mine that was an Italian restaurant on West 56th Street. It's called Briscoe's. And everything went great. And the owner of Briscoe's was a good friend of mine, and he just, went out of his. He pulled everything he could do. I even told your dad, we'll fix anything for you, even if it's not on the menu. So Nick finally, after we had a good meal, told me how impressed he was with our news media collection. Walter Cronkite and on and on. It's a huge collection. And he said that Liz Smith and I had lobbied him so hard they really couldn't say no at this point. So he decided to accept my offer to place his archive here at the Briscoe Center. He mentioned to me at that time that he was a graduate of Williams College in Massachusetts, and that he had tried to talk to them, but I guess they didn't return his phone call. So I jumped on that really fast. And he said, well, actually it's probably a good thing, because he said, Williams is out in rural Massachusetts, and I don't know if anyone ever goes there to look at the archives or whatever. And so he said, Austin was clearly the place to be, and that swung the deal. Before I actually got his autograph on a gift agreement, he called me sometime. I guess it was, I don't remember exactly now, Griffin, but he called me sometime in 2008, I think was the year, and he said he was suffering from bladder cancer. And he was going to have to start taking treatment, and he'd check with me later. He asked me to be patient with him, and so we're on your schedule, not our schedule. That was the last time we spoke. Very sadly, Nick died a year later, and he was going through all these treatments. I think you mentioned he went to Germany even, didn't he?
Tried the stem cell.
Yeah. But before Nick died, thankfully, he had told his assistant, a really nice guy named Jack Cummings, about his decision to donate his papers to the Briscoe Center. So after Nick died, Jack Cummings asked me to come to Manhattan to select and arrange Nick's papers to transfer to the Briscoe Center. This was a great relief, because I knew we didn't have a gift agreement. Mm-hmm. This is where this guy comes in. So while I'm in New York, Cummings told me that one of Nick's sons, who is Griffin, wanted to talk to me about his dad's papers. So Cummings assured me, now I already knew all about Griffin Dunne at this point, because one of my favorite movies is After Hours, and and he carries the whole movie. All right. But he said that you wanted to talk to me. As well you should. I mean, this was your father's papers. But Cummings assured me, he said, that despite Griffin growing up among Hollywood royalty and in Beverly Hills and running around with that crowd growing up when you were a kid. Of course, you got to New York as soon as you could.
As soon as I could.
But despite all of that, Griffin was actually a very nice guy who was easy to know and like, and that I would like him. So I was going to meet him no matter what, but that sort of made things even easier. And so Griffin, thankfully, I should say that Cummings' description of Griffin was absolutely correct. He's a wonderful guy. He's a nice guy. He's easy to be around. And not only did Griffin make it possible for us to get the papers, he was fine with that. But we got the papers, and happily I gained a friend. So that was a real good deal. Okay, Griffin, before we turn to the Friday afternoon club, I can't help this. When you watch the trailer for After the Party, which was the documentary about his dad, there was just a brief clip there of RFK Jr. I don't know if some of you, I don't know if everybody caught it or not. And all he says in the trailer is, well, Dunne is just a gossip columnist. Could you want to elaborate on what that was about?
I'd be happy to.
It's a kind of a timely question.
Yeah, yeah. So my father always thought when the Moxley girl was killed, from what he was doing, in his research, he felt the Greenwich Police Department, Connecticut, were suppressing evidence, that there was, Kennedy family involvement to suppress evidence. And all roads seemed to point toward Skakel, who was the cousin of RFK. Mm-hmm. Nothing was ever done, and then Dad wrote a book. There was actually a novel, but it put all this evidence together. Somehow that led to an actual trial, and it was during that trial that Bobby was talking about Dad, who was also, he was talking to Larry King there.
That was in the Larry King show.
Yeah, the next night it would be Dad talking about how horrible Bobby was to Larry, and they went back and forth, and these two men hated each other.
Wow.
And I guess, and oddly, I would meet Bobby now and then, and he made no association. I mean, he obviously knew, but he never carried that animus toward talking to me. He was very, very, very polite. The only one in the family who actually did bring problems and was rude to me because of who I was related to was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh.
When he was married to Maria Shriver.
Yeah.
I don't know why he took on that mantle, but so these two men, hated each other. And from Bobby's point of view, he was talking about defending a family, a relative. So, but nonetheless, that's where they and Dad had written about William Kennedy Smith of the rape trial in Palm Beach, and spoke, and reckless behavior that led to it from Ted Kennedy, and he had a relationship about the Kennedys that goes back to the 30s, where the Hartford Dunnes, there were same number of siblings, 5 children. Joe Kennedy had 5 children, and the Dunnes of Hartford were called the Kennedys of Hartford. The Kennedys of Cape Cod had no idea who the Dunnes of Hartford were, but my great aunt was, her father was the business partner of Joseph Kennedy in the liquor business, and when Prohibition ended, he cut her father out of the deal. There began the
some bad blood, as they say.
What?
Some bad blood in there.
That's where the.
Yeah.
But it also was like my father was like at a Robert Kennedy Sr.'s marriage to Ethel as a +1, and never got to meet, Bobby Sr. So there was all sorts of things sort of at play that really kind of had to do with being, his character of being. Feeling he was being, snubbed or overlooked, or so he had he always had a chip on his shoulder, which served him very well as a journalist.
Yeah, absolutely, that's an important ingredient. Whenever you met with RFK Jr., was he ever carrying around a dead bear cub or anything?
He smelled of a dead bear.
Okay. Just curious. I didn't know how often he did that. Okay. So let's cut to the quick here and ask. I'm going to ask him the most obvious question. Looking at this book, what inspired you to write a very personal book about your family?
Well, I kind of, I was the only one who, I don't know, paid attention enough to write down all the kind of amazing stories I would hear about, not just my parents' life that was both hilarious and tragic, but my great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents. All of them, were from different sides of the world. My mother's side of the family started in Mexico and came to America during the Spanish Revolution, during Pancho Villa drove them to Arizona. And my father's family came from the Great Famine. And there were just a lot of really interesting people in this family. And I thought I would be writing, as the subtitle says, just a family memoir, almost like a biography, starting.
Well, it is actually.
Yeah, and but I didn't know how important until I got to it chronologically. How important the demarcation when all our lives were forever changed when my sister was murdered.
Right.
And when I got to that point in the book, I just wrote part 2 because that was the life-changing event, and then carried on. And I used to always keep a file of really funny stories, either that would happen to me that I would tell that went over big, or the scandalous behavior of my great-grandparents on my mother's side. I have a great-grandmother whose husband died with a mistress on a yacht, and she turned to her lover and said, when she got the news, and said, my husband just died. Do you want to go can we get married? And they got married the next day, and she said, do you want to go to the funeral? And it was the Griffin family were, at one time, there were Griffin wheels under every Pullman car in America. So they were quite rich. So they took the Griffin wheels to the funeral. The press was having a field day. But the Griffin family had enough juice to divert their train and all its passengers away from Lake Forest in Chicago and took them to Wisconsin so they'd miss the funeral. And that was just one story.
Yeah, let me say,
the world should know. Yeah,
what he's saying is that it was your mother's family that founded the company that made all the wheels on the trains.
Yeah.
So that's a nice gig if you can.
So anyway, I wanted to get all that down, and it had been on my bucket list someday.
How long did it take you from starting to think about it and actually doing something?
I did a documentary about my aunt, Joan Didion.
Right.
And when I was doing the structure of her life and using archival footage that, in that case, also went back to her ancestors.
This was in 2017, right, when that came out?
Yes. Yeah. And I sort of thought, this is a good structure for telling the story of my family.
Oh, okay.
And I really got into the biographical details of my aunt, and the effect of the seismic effect that tragedy has on not just Joan, but everything around it. Yeah. And so I was starting to think more like structure.
So it was that documentary, working on that, which, by the way, I was a major investor in. You knew that.
Oh, did you get your tote bag?
No, I didn't. Oh. I didn't. That's the reason I'm bringing it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
All right, I'll make a note.
Introduced me. I gave him, I think I sent $500.
Oh, thank you.
It wasn't what's it called? A GoFundMe thing?
Yes.
To get the Joan Didion thing done. So I sent him, I think, $500. I had to sell one of my children to get it, but
it bought us lunch.
Yeah, and so that's important.
Right.
Well, in fact, you introduced me at a dinner in New York one time as a major investor of your.
Thank you for that.
So, I have to say, when you're already touching on some of this, this book is a real page turner if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, and Actually, it's mind-blowing in its candor. I mean, it is amazingly candid. But before we go any further, why the title? What was the title
I just want to say, in terms of the candor, I had to. The only living relative of my immediate family is my brother. He's 2 years younger than me, and I couldn't write the book and about my family without talking about passages in his life. He had struggled with mental illness, bipolar. He's bipolar. They called it manic depression at the time. It's since been called bipolar. And, he really had some tremendous struggles and went down a real rabbit hole. He was a brilliant guy. He's fine now. He's married. But when I asked him, I said, I'd like to write this book, but I can't do it unless, I have your blessing. Because I have to write about everything. And he said, you can write whatever you want about me, just have it come from a place of love. And I thought, that's my note. That's my note for all those people. And that gave me the freedom to be candid about my family members in their periods of struggle. And as you know, I deal with, closeted behavior and alcoholism and disease and mental illness. I knew where it was coming from. I knew in my, and it freed me up. So I never, and about myself too. I would just be just as open about myself. You can't write a memoir, and if you're not true, if what you're saying is like hiding something about yourself, it's going to show. Yeah. So I had to talk about my own peaks and valleys. Well,
you did that, and it's really one of the things that makes it such a special memoir, frankly. Yeah. Because in many memoirs I've read, you just know you're missing some really important things that kind of shape the person. He does it. So
this title is which
the
came me forever. I always knew the subtitle, but I had no idea really what to call it. And my editor, John Burnham Schwartz, saw that these words put together in the course of my storytelling. And the Friday Afternoon Club was when my sister was just starting out as an actress. Her name was Dominique, and she ended up in Poltergeist. And she was an actress that told me one day when I was struggling so hard I was a waiter, desperate to be an actor and always falling short. She said she wanted to be an actress. And I went, oh, God, don't do it. It's terrible. It's just awful. Do something else. And she got really angry at me and was on a soundstage in the lead in the movie a week later. And she never stopped working. But she took this acting class. And in her acting class were the other people at the very beginning of their careers, like Miguel Ferrer and Timothy Hutton, George Clooney. And on Friday afternoon, after their acting class, everybody would come to my mother's house, where Dominique lived. She had a little pool house. She lived in the back. And they would all just party and get drunk well into the night and laugh. And my mother was in a wheelchair at that point, would come out with a bottle of wine and wheel out with a new wine. And they go, thank you, Mrs. Dunne. All right. And she'd go back and have fun. And it was just I was never there. I was already in New York. But it was just a very happy memory. And it was really, it was important to me to emphasize the joy of.
It's a great title. It's a great title.
Yeah, and it was just, I knew a lot of sad stuff that could be in it, but that was just like a really happy memory where her life.
It sounds like the afternoons went into the evenings.
They certainly did.
Yeah,
certainly did.
Well, let's talk about your mother a minute, because we've talked about your father. Mm-hmm. Tell us about your mother.
She was a remarkable, strong, very, very beautiful woman who grew up on a cattle ranch. Her father, who was a Griffin, left he actually left a woman on the altar in Chicago, a big society wedding, and went to Arizona, where he was sort of cut out of the will for a while. And it was a great scandal. But he always wanted to be a rancher. And he had tubercular issues, you know. And that's, of course, where Teddy Roosevelt and so many others went. He went to school there as a child, in high school. And so he wanted to go back, and he became a cattle rancher. Knew nothing about cattle and did quite well. And met my grandmother, who was Mexican, and got her to get out of her wedding. And they were married. And so my mother grew up on this beautiful cattle ranch in Nogales, which is on the border of Mexico. And she had a very lonely childhood as an only child, and her father fought in the Pacific, but she wanted to be an actress, and so she came to New York. She lived at the Barbizon Hotel, which is where ladies of certain world would be there. No men were allowed past the lobby, and she met my father, who was in live television. He was the stage manager for Howdy Doody show, and did
true story.
And before that show went live, he would take the puppet as they were doing the countdown of 10, 9, 8, and just do filthy things to Howdy. filthy things. 9, 1, and then walk away, and there'd be Howdy, having no idea.
Hey kids, what time is it?
And so my mother found that story hilarious, and she was very she was well loved. She was very, very shy, but everyone who met her just fell in love with her. And
they called her Lenny, right?
And she was called Lenny.
Yeah.
And she was really the other half of my dad, and they were very social, as it's said. And then at one point, she just kind of got sick of all that. You know, all the kind of social climbing, the importance on celebrity, and
great contrast to your dad.
In great contrast, you know, Dad's priorities were at a very different place than they ended up later in life, and so she divorced him, which devastated my father. He called Lenny his wife to the end of his life, and then she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and it went, you know, started off with a cane and ended up with a walker and then a wheelchair, and when, you know, everyone knows, you know, the effect that the loss of Dominick had on my father, and how he became such a proponent for victims' rights. And when he would write about a murder trial, he never let you forget about Nicole or Lana Clarkson with Spectre. She became an activist for victims' rights and started her own group called Justice for Victims of Homicide in California. And they passed laws. There were amendments in California, are now in 25, 30 states, that protect the rights of victims, so they won't go through what we went through in the courtroom.
Which we'll get to.
And she would go out, this woman, and just wheel onto a stage of Geraldo Rivera or whatever daytime talk show, and get the message out of what happened. And she ended her life in Nogales. She returned to the town where she grew up, and that's where she died.
What you said, she became quite tired of the partying and all that. Well, but let's talk about those parties a minute. There's reference to it in the clips and so forth, and these elaborate parties that his parents hosted, and when you were a kid. And what were they like? Who would attend?
Well, I'm asked this often, but you know,
they were legendary, and
yeah, they were. And I know, you know, I was 6, 7, 8 when the peak of these parties were going on, and there would be Billy Wilder and David Niven and William Wyler and John Huston and young Warren Beatty and young Dennis Hopper, and we would come down. My father was very, interested in how things looked. And one of the looks he wanted was us to be in the boys to be in these satin bathrobes, and Dominique in a little nightgown, a little like a Dickens with a little Dickens nightcap. And we'd come down, and the guests would all be just starting to get bombed. And they'd all go, ooh and ah, as we bowed, and Dominique would curtsy. And they go, oh, that's so adorable. Years later, I was smoking a joint with Dennis Hopper. And he said, remember the time you had your parents? You guys had to come down and bow and curtsy? I went, yeah. He goes, that was the saddest thing I ever saw in my life. And it was. But I didn't know who, I was too young to talk to Billy Wilder about Ace in the Hole and Some Like It Hot.
Well, yeah.
And, William Wyler and...
Well, didn't Cary Grant pull you out of the swimming pool?
No, that was Sean Connery.
Oh, Sean Connery.
He I did know.
Even better.
I was trying to impress Sean Connery, and I'd never been in the deep end of my life, and I jumped in, and there was a party all around us in the pool, and I sunk like a stone, and he happened to be in the pool already. And I'm looking up, having no idea how to get there, and it was like an upside-down Hockney painting. And this hand lifted me up by the rump and put me on the side and said, a wee too early for the deep end, sonny.
Bond, James Bond.
Yes. So him I did know. But, luckily, as my dad's priorities were about these parties and who came to his house, he was also a really good photographer. And had a excuse me, a Hasselblad, and would document everything that he would iron into these scrapbooks that I'm going to give you. I can't let go, but they're perfect for you guys are going to have them.
I'm so happy.
But they're about 30 they come up this high, and each one weighs about 20 pounds, and it's a document like the most brilliant document of Hollywood from 1959 to 1967, when my father broke up with my mother. My mother broke up with him, and then he never touched a camera again.
Oh, wow.
But these books are priceless. And
I saw you paging through one on Sunday. Was it CBS Sunday Morning?
Yes, it's the greatest thing he could have left me. And it was a great resource when I was writing the book.
Oh, I bet.
But they were, so I would mostly hear about the parties from other people. Like, I remember Angelica Houston read the book, and she said, she knew I was writing the book and was writing, and she said, at that party, the black and white ball, my father had this on the 10th anniversary of his marriage to Lenny, of which there would not be an 11th. He gave the black and white ball, and at the end, it went on all night long, and they served eggs for the people who were still around. And early in the morning, John Huston and William Wyler got into a fist fight on the lawn that was broken up by and I never knew that until Angelica told me. But
his daughter had to tell you. I mean, John Huston's
daughter told me.
Tell you about the fist fight.
And so. So I would gather things from that. But one of the guests was Truman Capote.
Mm-hmm.
And Truman Capote really livened up the party. And he brought, who were not invited and didn't have place settings for, was the detective that solved In Cold Blood in Kansas of the Clutter family. And so they were there. And then the next year, Truman Capote gives his black and white ball, which everyone remembers, and didn't invite Dad.
Oh.
And he never forgot that.
I bet.
But then, flash forward, Dad is, has lost all of his money, and he's living in a cabin in Oregon and reflecting on his life and getting sober. And he'd been there for almost a year, and he gets a letter. Somehow, Truman Capote found out where he was in this cabin. And he'd gone through Lacote Bosque and been shunned by by society and was drinking heavily. And he wrote and said, I know you're there licking your wounds, and and no one knows what shame is more than me, but that is not where you belong. You must come back to the real world. And that's what he did, and he came back to New York. But there was no talk between the two men, between the black and white ball and the letter 20 years later.
Let's talk a little bit about your close relationship with Carrie Fisher, Debbie Reynolds' daughter, of course, famously. Of course, Carrie was really shot up like a meteor to international stardom, and her role is, if anyone forgets this, that I want to talk to you about later, her role is Princess Leia in the original Star Wars movie. You may have heard about that. Anyway, you've described Carrie as your best friend. How did you meet her?
When she was 15, and my brother was 15, my brother came, who was an incredible romantic and like the most poet. And he is a kid, but as a kid, he could read Theodore de Chardin, he could read philosophy. He was like a genius, but an open, just his heart was on his sleeve. And he came in the house and he said, I just met a girl I'm in love with, and her name is Carrie Fisher. And he looked at me and goes, and don't you talk to her. Don't you trick her into loving you. And so she came to the house, and she was hilarious, and I tried to keep my mouth shut. But we became like best friends, and to my brother's dismay, but we were just sort of on the same wavelength, we just... we're funny and made up stuff and sang musicals off the top of our head. And then I moved to New York. She wrote long, long letters or sometimes just postcards with hilarious 2 sentences. And so when she came to New York, she was in the chorus of her mother's musical called Irene. And
Carrie was in the chorus.
She was in the chorus. And then we became roommates. And we, and it was,
Well, didn't Debbie play a role in you becoming a roommate with her daughter?
Oh, she insisted on it. She said, my daughter wants to get an apartment in New York City and live on her own, and that is out of the question, and you have to be her roommate. And I said, well, I live in the East Village already. I've got a place that is sort of a workshop for thieves. So she had us move into the maid's room at the Des Artistes, which is a very fancy, beautiful building on the Upper West Side. And I'm a downtown guy. It was not up my alley, but at least it was the maid's room. And we just had this like really fun, hilarious time. And then she said, oh, listen, I got this part in a movie. And both of us were going on readings somewhat, her more than me. I was a waiter at Beefsteak Charlie's.
And you were also selling popcorn at...
And I was selling popcorn at Radio City Music Hall. And I doing everything but acting. And she said, she's in this movie, got this part. And I go, what's it called? And she goes, it's called Star Wars. And I don't even understand the script. It's terrible. And so she goes to London and would call me on her time, that was 5 a.m. my time, and just start complaining like, oh my God, this movie is so terrible. You should see my hair. I have 2 bagels on the side of my head. And there's this big monkey that chases us that we're running around, and there's a little man in a trash can, in a gold trash can that wheels along. And this is going to be the biggest turkey ever. And then I went to the very first screening ever shown of Star Wars. Even the studio hadn't seen it, a final cut.
Where was it? Where did you see that?
Ziegfeld in New York.
Oh, okay.
Biggest theater in New York.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even advertised. It just had people in the sort of science fiction world just sort of heard a calling from a distant planet. And they all descended onto this place. And then the moment the crawl happened, and we saw those fights of the galaxies with the beat up rocket ships and going around, we just knew movies will never be the same, you know, and
But you were expecting a turkey, right? When you
well, we'd never seen it. We knew it was not. We knew this was the biggest thing ever.
No, but when you saw it, you knew it was the biggest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it was, you know, when I was a young guy and I was like, she became a star, like a major star, like overnight. And our little world was sort of disrupted with phone calls from, you know, the Eagles and, you know, James Taylor and all these people I grew up worshiping are now doing blow in our house. And I was too, you know, I was still a waiter, you know. And, so we, you know, parted ways I moved out and then we regained our friendship later.
Well, you've commented before that Carrie's success, which is what you're talking about, of course, you know, that movie led to your being, and this is a quote from you, led to your being around, quote, people it wasn't my time to meet yet.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is an interesting quote. And that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're a waiter and she's Princess Leia.
Yeah, and I didn't, I wanted to get my own, you know, to get my own reputation and work, you know, and work in the field that I moved to New York to be doing, to feel sort of secure enough to be around my best friend who was globally famous, you know. It's a form of insecurity and ego or whatever, but that's, you know, how I felt.
Let's talk about your father's brother, a book author and screenwriter, John Gregory Dunne, and of course you've already mentioned his wife, the acclaimed writer Joan Didion, which I was an investor in a documentary that you did.
Oh, I heard that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about your parents' relationship with them.
When Joan wrote an essay called Goodbye to All That, it was about leaving New York, and she was very depressed, and John suggested they move to Los Angeles, where Dad was and my mother were, you know, at the peak of their social skills and their partying. And so Joan met my mother over the phone and looked for a house for them to move in. And on my mother's recommendation, they got this house, rented this house. And they came to Los Angeles, and the brothers were close at that time. And Dad brought them, you know, and they would go to the parties, and John Gregory Dunne, John was a brilliant journalist and funny man. And he met the president of 20th Century Fox and convinced him to let him sit in on story meetings and on sets of movies and observe the running of a studio. Mm-hmm. And the book he wrote was called The Studio. It's still the best book about Hollywood and how movies are made.
The Studio.
Yeah, and it's set at a time when it's before Easy Rider, and the studio's invested everything in Cleopatra and Dr. Dolittle, which were famous flops. And he wrote this scathing but hilarious portrait of a studio. And just to show you how, you know, convincing he could be as a journalist. As my father, you know, lost all of his friends, all of his money, he had a drinking problem, and just his life imploded. John and Jones, now we're coming to the 70s, were in the zeitgeist of filmmakers of that time. And, you know, when movies like, and they lived in the beach, and, you know, where Scorsese and Steven Spielberg and Warren Beatty and all the people that were doing that kind of work that were a very different generation than the filmmakers and actors that were sort of at the tail end of their careers who came to my parents' parties. And my father was an outcast, so built and broke and building. So there was resentment already between these two men, and it carried on for years. And I was always in the middle because I was very, very close to them, and they would invite me. From the time I was like 13, they'd invite me to these incredible parties they would go to, and I would, so I was very close with them, and I couldn't. I would always fail at trying to bring them together,
trying to navigate through.
Yeah, and I was Neville Chamberlain, and it was a disaster, and it really, particularly them, when. They adored, my sister worked for John and Joan as an assistant, and she looked after Quintana, their daughter, when they were away on business. And so they were devastated by the murder. But sometimes not sometimes, a lot of times, an act of violence or a sudden death in a family is so devastating it drives people apart. Even instead of bringing them together, it has the exact opposite effect.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened at that time between both of our families. And this carried on. This if I ever went out with John and Joan, and he would hear about it, Dad would get upset, and then Dad became famous in the very field that John and Joan were in as a journalist, and then as a best-selling author of novels. And so it was just toxic. Until one day, John had always had what he called a weak ticker. And he had a cardiologist he went to for checkups. And Dad had a mild heart attack, neither men knowing anything about that. And my father walks into his appointment with the cardiologist's office, and John, he was about to live for less than a year. John is in with his appointment, and these two men see each other in a cardiologist's office. And Dad walks in and sees him as just the two of them, and he picks up a magazine and pretends to read it. And he feels John looking at him, and the two look at each other. And John goes, excuse my profanity here, "What the fuck are we doing?" And they just roar with laughter. Like, it all just went away. And, it took that, like, how precious.
Yeah.
And they talked on the phone every day.
Wow.
He took my slot in his morning slot for the phone calls that John would roll. And they would just, talk about who got a bad review and have you seen this, and gossip about the old days. And thank God, my dad, when John died so suddenly, Dad said at the end of his days, "Thank God I walked into that office. Thank God."
That's that's quite a lesson there, I think.
Yeah.
For everybody, really. You were talking about the parties that John and Joan threw. I know you went with your mother to one of their parties. I don't know how old you were at the time when this happened, but you were hoping to meet Janis Joplin. You had heard that Janis Joplin was going to be at the party. It was right after her first album was out. How old would you have been?
I was 13.
13. And you were, kind of weirded out about going to a party with your mother, but you wanted to meet Janis Joplin. Yeah. And tell us about that party.
Well, on the drive over with my mom, I said, "Listen, could you pretend you don't know me when we get there?" Because Joan had called to invite my mother to the party, and she said, "I know how much Griffin loves Janis. Bring him." And so I said, "Listen, if I'm talking to Janis, I don't want you to come over." And she goes, "So just pretend we don't know each other." I went, "Yes." She goes, "Fine, but we're not going to stay late, and I'm going to have a signal. I'm going to wink at you across the room like I'm just some other pretty girl at a party, but you got to go." And so I'm wandering around, waiting for Janice, and this bald man in a Nehru jacket and like a pendant grabs me and makes me sit down next to him. And like Sgt. Pepper is playing and people are dancing and talking and dope is being passed around. And he goes, come sit with me. These people here, they have terrible vibes. And I'm looking at him, I go, oh my God, it's Colonel Klimt from Hogan's Heroes. And he goes, I have taken the acid. I am having the bummer. These people are evil, evil. You must stay with me. And he was clutching my hand, and I'm less impressed now. I'm talking to Hogan's Heroes, which I love that show. And he's more and more strident, and I finally I hear Get It While You Can starts to play, and that's my cue. Janice is here. They rip my hand away, and he screams, and this part I might be making up. He goes, stop or you will be shot. And, but it wasn't Janice. Janice she showed up too late. My mother made me go.
She had a show that didn't end at 1 o'clock.
She had a show at the Palladium, and it went on too late. So I never got to meet her. And so the next day, Joan calls my mother to rehash the party, and she's telling him, and Joan says, put on Griffin. And so I start to tell her about meeting Colonel Klimt, and that he was on. She goes, hold on one sec. John, pick up. And the two of them are on. She goes, go on. And I tell him the story, and, that Colonel Klimt and the guy from Hogan's Heroes wasn't funny at all. And they just start laughing. And I go, what? She goes, that wasn't Colonel Klimt. That was Otto Preminger. So, and then they proceeded to tell me he almost killed Jean Seberg by setting her on fire to play Joan of Arc.
The movie Joan of Arc.
He wanted to get the horror in her eyes. So I got off easy.
Well, as I said, one of my favorite movies is After Hours, and Aaron has already mentioned some of the movies you've been in and done and so forth. And After Hours premiered in 1985, so this is the 40th anniversary of that. And it's since become a cult classic, and you star in the movie and carry the entire film. I mean, it's just... but before we say anything about it, I want to show a quick official trailer for After Hours.
I produced it too, but who's counting?
Why don't you just go home?
I've been asking myself that one all night long.
So what happened? Why can't you?
I met this girl tonight, okay, in a coffee shop.
I feel like something incredible is really going to happen here.
So when I got home, I gave her a call. On the cab on the way down here, all my money flew out the window. I didn't really get along with her that well.
What's the matter?
I said, I want to see a plaster of Paris bagel and cream cheese paperweight. Now cough it up. So I left. Gigi! So I haven't got enough money to get home until I meet this bartender who wanted to lend me the money. That's all right, forget it. It's all right.
Oh, boy.
So I go back to the girl's apartment, but her roommate's really pissed off at me for the way I treated her friend.
This the guy?
Hi. So I march right in there to apologize. Come on! But she'd already killed herself. I was too late.
Oh, wow.
Lighten up. What is this?
I'm in big trouble. Big trouble. Now this part, you're gonna say, oh, you're lying to me. Don't lie to me, but it's true. Mohawk this guy. I couldn't believe that. That's him. Tell him, it's not my fault. I didn't do it.
I gotta tell who you didn't do what.
Help! 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 Call the police!
What's with you? Are you nuts or something?
Luckily, there was this girl who saw the whole thing.
You're dead, pal.
And what? So now she's the one in the Mr. Softy ice cream truck who's trying to kill me. They're all trying to kill me. I just wanted to leave. My apartment, maybe meet a nice girl. And now I've got to die for it, What do you want from me? What have I done? I'm just a word processor, damn it.
Is that all there is?
After Hours, when anything can happen, and usually does.
Is that unbelievable or what?
That's all there is, my friends. Then let's keep dancing.
Well, I mean, I must say, one of the fascinating things to me as a historian is I love any movie that's shot in a particular period of time, you know, the 40s, 50s, whatever.
Yeah, me
that's
too.
shot very much on location. Because you get to see an area and its place and time, and you know, and I love that. And one of the things I love about this movie, I mean, there's a lot to love about this movie, but it really captures the place and the culture of New York City, and particularly lower New York City in the mid-1980s. I understand you had a proposal for that film. I mean, you took it to Tim Burton, didn't you?
Yes, he was the
famous for Beetlejuice.
Yeah,
but not at that time.
Not at that time. He'd only done a short movie called Frankenweenie, and we just loved the look of it. My producing partner, Amy Robinson, and I, and and Terry Garr, who's a friend, a very close friend. Also signed on. So we had Terry and Tim, but we couldn't get the money. And I was the star, and I was nobody. And so that didn't work out. But before we gave it to Tim, we gave it to Scorsese. Amy was in Mean Streets. She played Teresa in Mean Streets. And so she knew Marty, and we also coincidentally had the same lawyer. So. But he was off to do Last Temptation of Christ the first time he tried. And the movie fell apart while he was in Morocco. And on his flight back, he read After Hours. And the lawyer called and said, you know, Marty wants to do your movie. And then we told Tim, like, oh, weirdest thing happened. And he stops, he goes, wait a minute, are you saying Martin Scorsese wants to direct this movie? We went, yeah, we haven't said yes yet, but yeah. I gracefully bow out. I won't do anything to stand in his way. And the next movie he did was it Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Oh, okay.
Came out the same time.
That's right. Pee-wee, yeah.
Same studio. And just kicked our ass at the box office. But even then, when he was telling us and he was gracefully withdrawing, we knew we didn't have to worry about him. He was clearly a visionary.
Well, I want to, because of the time we're running out here, I want to really, point out something. I mean, sort of hanging over the narrative in your book is the tragic story of your younger sister. Mm-hmm. Actor Dominick Dunne. This is understandably a very difficult subject for you, and it must have been difficult writing about it. But you write in the book that after Dominick's death, quote, nothing was ever the same for you or your family. You want to tell us a little bit what you want to say about it?
Well, I know you'd think it would be difficult to write about, but I was compulsive about writing it. And I was, my father wrote the most brilliant article, the very first thing that was mentioned there about what our family went through, the very first thing he ever had published. But that was from a father's point of view. And I was writing it, what I went through as a sibling and what my brother went through. And writing about the trial that I witnessed every day that I went. And I was shooting a movie on a very silly comedy called Johnny Dangerously. When I wasn't in the courtroom, I'd be off doing this very silly movie, playing a district attorney, of all things, in a sort of 30s madcap Warner Brothers gangster sort of comedy, and then going to a real courtroom. And so I put myself in what I was like at that time. And I would go through the the day-to-day of my life, either in the courtroom or on the set, and back and forth. And I could, memories and everything, and just weather, rooms, furniture, everything was like coming back. And so I was quite compulsive. I could not stop writing, and when I did stop writing, I'd pull back and go, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that happened. Like, it really happened. And, you know, in this trial, from day one, this judge just had it in for us. We don't know why. I think he hated our district attorney, who we liked very much. And he made these rulings that were outrageous. And, you know, he would we found someone who, the killer had a previous girlfriend that he had beaten so badly, and we got her to be she was shaking with fear to come in, but she bravely came in and agreed to testify. And he sent her, the judge sent the jury away because he wanted to make sure it wasn't too prejudicial. And she then described the killer knocking her eye sockets out and wiring her jaw and the broken bones in her body. And the jury did not see that, nor did they see that the killer was so angry that he was being spoken about like this, that he got up out of a seat, he was a large man, and approached her as if to attack or leave the room. We don't know.
In the courtroom.
In the courtroom, and the bailiffs pulled him to the ground, and they saw him grunt with rage. Mm-hmm. And the jury did not see that. And then the jury did not see, once he was brought back to his seat, the judge say, we know how difficult this is for you, Mr. Sweeney. So every day was a version of that. And the way that they do the blame the victim defense. So they tried to drag Dominique's career and name and created a whole narrative of as if it was a crime of passion. So, excuse me. So anyway, when I was writing about it, I was in disbelief, you know, at what was going on, and I used a dad's notes that I came to see you and was over at Briscoe and getting all the papers, making sure I had everything down right, and I learned things I didn't know that were going on and what was going on in my dad's head. And so it was a mission, and I realized how important a part of the story of our family's life it was, and what I thought would be a chapter, you know, is the last half of the book,
right?
And not just the last day of the trial going on, but how the trial affected all of our lives, affected decisions I made personally and in relationships with people, and decisions I made in work, and the paths that my parents took, and the struggles my brothers had post that period in our life.
Yeah, and you do it so eloquently. I mean, it's such a it's just absorbing. You know, like I said, it's a real page turner. I mean, it's just you know. Well, we've got a time thing here. I want to pay attention to. You know, all of these things that we're talking about right now are very detailed in the book. So you've got a treat if you haven't had a chance to read the book yet. You're going to get a free copy up in the reception area. So, you know, I want to read a passage. Here we've got a couple of things I want to talk about, but I want to read a passage, from the Friday Afternoon Club. This is a direct quote. 4 years after my father died, I went to Austin, Texas to visit the Briscoe Center for American History, where his papers were archived. This is directly out of the book. I missed him, meaning your dad, of course, and wanted to wade through the stacks of his Smithson notebooks, filled with handwritten reflections and read early drafts of his articles and novels containing details that never made it to print because I wanted to hear his voice. You go on in there to say, to note that your father's papers included a notebook that apparently was the diary that your father was keeping during this farcical trial of his daughter's murder. And you explained that as you read your father's diary, quote, brief flashes of brief flashes of his face came to me, meaning his father. I went through his archives because I missed him. My trip to Austin only made me miss him more. So, in taking care of your father's papers, Griffin, I hope that the Briscoe Center has met your hopes and expectations.
Oh, it really has.
Because it's very important to us with what we do.
Yeah, very well.
And again, I appreciate all the help that you've given us to get the papers and everything else you're doing as an ambassador on the council. But before we end the program here, I want to point out that Griffin's latest movie is titled Ex-Husbands, which can be viewed right now on a number of streaming channels, including Amazon Prime and Apple TV and a couple of others. So I'm going to show you a quick trailer, the official trailer for Ex-Husbands.
Shameless plug. His idea.
Can I tell you something? We're getting a divorce, your mother and I.
You think you're going to be happier alone?
Who says I gotta be alone?
Is there someone else?
Not at the moment, but say I got 30 good years left in me.
30?
20, 25.
You'll be 110.
Did you have a chance to look everything over yet? I'd just rather rip the Band-Aid off.
Well, after 35 years, it doesn't feel so much like a Band-Aid as it does my own flesh.
We can't break up together.
Oh, I am just a vagabond, adrift.
Hey, Dad, where are you going?
Tulum.
Dad, we are going to Tulum this weekend for Nick's bachelor party.
I didn't know you guys would be there.
With everything that you're going through, you sort of present as like a bit needy.
It's interesting. I don't see myself that way.
What is going on?
He told me he had a ticket.
Why didn't you ask him to reschedule?
I did, and he said that he would.
So slow.
You hear about the couple in their 90s that filed for divorce? A lawyer says to him, you're both in your 90s. Why bother getting divorced? And they answer him, we were waiting for the kids to die.
I think you got yourself a pretty solid cadre.
This is still a bachelor party. It's not your daughter's quinceañera.
Save Lowry. He's such an unpleasant, odd little man.
Thea and I were breaking up.
Hey, is this news to you guys?
How many kids do you have, Peter?
I have 2 boys. You?
None. No kids. Never married.
Nicely done.
Sweet harmony.
You know, as you guys get older, you're going to have to work harder to find time for each other. But it is well worth the effort.
You guys hear about the couple in their 90s who got a divorce?
They waited for the kids to die.
Sweet harmony.
Well, we'll continue to be shameless for a second because he's... Yeah. We're going to continue for just a moment to be shameless again. He's got another movie coming out this summer. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I'm part of an ensemble of actors in Darren Aronofsky's new movie. It's called Caught Stealing with Austin Butler and Regina King and Bad Bunny and Liev Schreiber. And it's very unlike any of Darren's other movies. It's very, what's actually already compared to After Hours in the course of one night. And it's funny. I haven't seen it, but I saw the trailer. Looks funny.
So that's going to come out in June.
July.
Oh, July, okay, all right. Well, I want to invite all of you, first of all, please join me in thanking, again, Griffin Dunne. So I want to invite all of you to attend the reception up in the Briscoe Center. We have an exhibit of the Goodwin, Doris Kearns Goodwin and her husband, late husband, Richard Goodwin's papers, which you looked at.
They're amazing.
And we have a reception up there. That you have to go up the stairs. Hopefully most of you know where the Briscoe Center is, but we have staff out there guiding you. And you're going to receive a free copy of the Friday Afternoon Club at the reception as our appreciation for your attendance tonight, and also your interest in the Briscoe Center. And if those of you who are, or if anyone here is not interested in the Briscoe Center, I hope you will be in the future. So thanks again for, pardon me? And Griffin has signed them for everyone. Yeah, they're signed. The books are already signed. So we, again, thank you for coming, and be careful making the trip up to the Briscoe Center. Thank you.
Thank you.